Alright, so we went ahead and we changed the valve cover on the AMG, getting rid of the oil leak problem. The valve cover was dripping down and leaking on the exhaust manifold down there. Ended up having to do the gasket a couple of times, replace it with just a new gasket. Still was leaking. I noticed that it was kind of, here it is. It was actually leaking from up top over here. So every time I would look at it, there'd be a puddle of oil right here in these little areas right here. So my first thought was that basically something had to be cracked right here. I didn't see any way oil could be leaking past the cover and getting up top up here. So we went ahead and bought a new valve cover itself. Put that on, and everything seems to be holding pretty well so far. The only thing is it does have a little bit of a rough running issue at idle. So my thoughts are a couple things. One, I noticed we did have a little bit of oil residue in the engine bay after she first got it and was kind of driving it around, as well as just with it leaking twice like that. I'm wondering if it had to do more with like crankcase pressure. So I went ahead and bought the PCV kit, new bolts, new PCV intake manifold gaskets. Here, go ahead, and this thing's pretty cheap. I know it's a common problem on these, for the hoses to be cracked or for the actual PCV to fail itself. So pretty cheap to do. We'll go ahead, throw it on there just to make sure we can get the intake manifold off and check to see how it's functioning and just replace it while we're in there. Not too bad of a job, just got to pull the intake manifold off, and it should be right there. I know some guys do it without pulling the intake manifold off, but sometimes I've found that it's just easier to just get stuff out of your way and makes the job a lot smoother. I know the first time I did the valve cover gasket, I didn't pull the wiring off the front right here, these plugs. And there's two wires that go to the two actuators, and they come over here to a plug, that plug right there and another plug right there. And I found the second time just going ahead and pulling those off makes the job a whole lot easier. Just being able to pull this wiring harness up out of the way, because otherwise you can't get the valve cover gasket over top of the cam bearings. So you end up kind of catching it on the edge of the bolt, and makes for not the most ideal situation for sliding a gasket over. So
stop. Oh my god.
So it could seem obvious, but something I don't see a lot of people do. When you're getting a plug off, especially when it's been on there for a while, a lot of the times, you know, everything's just kind of seized up, it doesn't want to move, and you're trying to press the release on it, and it's not gonna release. Something that works literally almost every time is what you'll do before you start pushing on the button is push the plug forward. That'll get pressure off of the tab to allow you to actually be able to push that button. And most of the time, let's see, put this camera down real quick. What you'll be able to do is push the clip forward, push the button down, and it'll pop right off. But if you try and just push the button, it has too much tension on it to just push it. So it's a pain to come off. So once you push it forward, push the button, and it'll usually slide right off. Nice little trick, just makes life really easy. The other thing that I work with all the time is picks. Dental picks are your best friend when it comes to wiring harnesses, because you can do the same thing, push forward and just grab the front of the clip right here, and that kind of helps prevent from breaking the tabs, because sometimes the pivot point on the tab is just too far forward and you don't get you know, you'll have too much leverage on that, and with the old brittle plugs, sometimes it'll just snap off. So it's a good way to kind of keep the plugs intact a little bit better, keep the clips from breaking, and just a very easy way to get the plugs off. Alright, so we got the covers off, the air filters. That's pretty straightforward. Next, what we got to do is pull this intake boot off to the dual mass airflows. It's pretty simple. There's a clip on the bottom. You just got to kind of get to it and pull the clips out. Pop one side up, pop the other one off, and pull that up. So we got that off. What we'll be replacing is going to be this PCV valve right here. I guess the issue with doing it in the car is this is hard to get to back here, but I don't know. I might see how it goes trying to reach it, see if I can get it undone without pulling the intake manifold off. I can kind of feel it, but I might not be able to squeeze the hose enough to get it off there. But I'm gonna give it a shot and see if I can. The other thing is just a bolt right here, holding that in to the intake manifold. So if I can get the bottom one out, then I might not even have to pull the intake off, which would definitely be a little bit easier. Don't look like it's too hard to pull the intake manifold off. I think yeah, so we'll leave the fuel rail on. We'll probably just disconnect the line, and you got a few things kind of clipped onto it. You got that's on here. I have to take up a couple little brackets off, but yeah, it really looks pretty simple to take this intake manifold off, but I may not speak too soon because who knows what will happen. So that blow gave me hell. had to go through all the tricks on that one. So something you always want to avoid is pulling on the wires when you're pulling the plug out. Even if it's not coming out, try to avoid pulling on the wire so you don't mess up the harness. So this one I was having a hard time getting out. Even getting the pick in on the sides and trying to get the tabs to pull up, it was just too stuck on there. So sometimes what you end up having to do is just grab like a screwdriver and give like a twisting motion as you're trying to release the tabs, and that'll get some leverage going against the plug and minimize the risk of destroying the plug. Now, one thing I did do before I started this, one with having to take off some of the plugs, and most especially having to take off the fuel feed line, I went ahead and disconnected the battery. You don't want to have the fuel pump priming while you got the fuel line disconnected. I don't know if this car does it, but I know a lot of newer cars, as soon as you come up to it with the key fob or anything, you unlock the doors or open the doors, a lot of times the fuel pump will prime once that door opens or something. So I don't want to have to get something out of the car or accidentally hit the key in my pocket or something and have that turn on and spray fuel all over a car. So good thing to keep in mind when you're pulling fuel lines off. So what I found seems to be a decent, easy way to get these injector plugs out is get a hook dental pick, a hooked dental pick, and you can get underneath of that arm right there, and just kind of lift it up, and then get the screwdriver in there to help pull it out with pressure on both sides so you don't break that injector. That seems to come right off. So yeah, same thing. Give it a little bit of a push down, once you get it down, you can get that clip to move, and then boom. Pretty simple. These clips that hold the wiring harness on the fuel rail, these are actually made for a zip tie to go through it, be able to take them back out. So it looked like they were one piece, but they ended up actually being designed with two pieces like that. So I'll have to get a new one for these two. There's a little Christmas tree, didn't want to come out of that fuel rail in one piece, so I have to grab two new ones of those. So what I did down here, I just went ahead and pulled the vacuum line off here. I'm pretty sure there's like a plastic clip inside of here, and I really don't feel like that breaking just by the plastic being too brittle. So most of the times when it comes to vacuum hoses, you can just take a hooked dental pick or something, get up in there and kind of go around the tube. It'll help kind of break up that seal that it might have, just from being stuck on the end of the hose barb for so long. So you just get up in there and do like a circular motion around where it seals. Sometimes you might have to spray some penetrating oil or something in there. I usually use Deep Creep by Seafoam. Seems to be a lot better than PB Blaster and WD-40. About the only thing that's good for is keeping water and moisture away. So when you're taking these off, make sure you're taking the proper bolts off, because there's two sets of bolts. I think it's one's to hold the bottom half of the intake manifold on, and the other one is, the bigger one, is actually bolting the intake manifold down to the motor. So make sure you're taking the right bolts off when you're doing that. She's definitely blowing a lot of oil by. So we'll go ahead, pop that thing off, get the dirt cleaned out of here, get the surfaces nice and cleaned up, and get everything back together. You are using the razor blade on aluminum. Something you want to try and make sure of is, as much as possible, you want to have the whole blade across the aluminum, or at least as much as possible, to keep you from accidentally tilting it up and end up gouging it. Whereas if you have the whole thing across, you're not really going to be able to gouge it, and you'll be able to kind of go around like this and kind of get any excess material sticking off, and keep you from gouging it. Something else that I found to be really helpful, I was a machinist for a little bit. Where is it? I got it here somewhere. Oh, right in front of me. So right here, I have this Arkansas stone. It's really nice for Once you get everything, you can kind of go over top and you're able to find any high spots, any nicks, anything that's going to be sticking up and preventing the gasket material from sitting all the way down. As you go over it, you'll be able to feel how it feels, and you'll feel snags basically if you're taking anything that's sticking up off, as well as you'll be able to see the shinier spots are going to be your high spots. You don't want to go crazy with it, just enough to be able to kind of clean it up and let the gasket sit on there nicely. You don't want a perfectly polished finish. If you start making it too shiny, you could potentially take away from the gasket sealing properly, but they are nice just for at least knocking any high spots down and making sure you don't have just like a little lip somewhere that could be sticking up, or maybe something nicked it and you have a little bit of material sticking up past it and could cause a leak. So really nice to have. Wish I would have had them years ago, but got it now, so use it pretty much every time. So one thing I noticed, this intake manifold, I'll have to look up and see exactly what it is. I guess it might be magnesium or something. It's definitely got a different kind of surface finish to it. Cleanup on it, definitely going to be a little different. Trying to keep any abrasives to a minimum. It doesn't seem like this will do real well with much abrasive. Alright, so with these, obviously this cutout right here is going to be clearance for the injector, and then the side that has the kind of hump right there goes up. You'll be able to tell because it'll be the only way that these holes will align with bolts for the intake manifold. Alright, so one thing when you're putting this intake manifold back on is to make sure that the hose that runs across and down, make sure that that makes it behind or underneath of this coolant hose that goes down. So you're gonna have to take the intake manifold and drop the back down into it and set the front of it down. That way that hose doesn't get pinched when you tighten the intake manifold down. End up breaking that hose, or worse, breaking something over there by the heater core. Torque sequence is 10 Newton meters, then 90 degrees, then 10 degrees. The sequence is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Like that. It's a little bit different. I know a lot of the times it's kind of like spiraling from the inward out, but that's not the case on this one. So. Here we go. 10 Newton meters. All 10 times. We got the 10 in the corner. Now we're going to switch to angle, 90 degrees. Something to be mindful of when you're doing degree torque, because sometimes it can be harder to tell if you've torqued or not. If you're torquing into an actual like foot-pound or inch-pound measurement, it's easy because you can go back over and double check to verify that you're at the right torque. But if you're doing angle torque, you can't really go back and measure degrees. So it's good to put a dot, something on it after you've marked it, so after you've torqued it. That way you know that you've done degrees on that one. And if there's 2 sets, you can just put 2 dots, and that'll let you know kind of what you've done and haven't done yet. This is why a digital degree torque wrench is nice, because you don't always have the clearance to just lay out degrees right there. So this allows you to be able to ratchet and make sure that you're good. And now we'll go ahead and do 10 degrees. Now the rest will really just be putting everything else on, putting the wiring harness for the injectors back on, getting these plugged in. Don't forget the coolant sensor down there if you unplug that one. If not, I'm sure you can probably get it without it. It just wasn't very hard to take off. So. Hopefully, this bad boy won't be on here for too much longer. If you know, you know. Alright, so there you have it. That is how to change the PCV valve and or the intake manifold if you're only doing that, but I'd highly recommend just go ahead and doing the PCV while you're in there. All in all, it's really not that bad of a job. pretty straightforward. Obviously, I'm still gonna put the cover on right here, but kind of checking things out and making sure everything sounds okay, making sure I don't hear any vacuum leaks or anything. This time I had to pull the thing off, so hopefully sometime in the near future I have a supercharger on me. So, good, yep.